It's a beautiful day, so I thought we'd take a little visit to this field, which you may recognise as the location where I scattered and planted lots of acorns last year. This is a piece of, well, it used to be farmland, but it's now been left derelict for several years. And as you can hear, we're not far from a road. But it's my hope that this will be transformed and allowed to go back to nature. You can see there's work going on over there. There's a bypass being built through there. And there are houses the other side of the road being built. But I'm hoping this bit of land will be allowed to return to a more natural state. So what I thought we'd do today is have a little wander around here and just see if we can recognise a few more plants. I've got my book with me. See if we can identify a few more plants, and I might have a look and see if there's any evidence of my acorns sprouting. So I'm not going to venture very far into the grass here, because in the longer grass there could be ground nesting birds and I don't want to disturb the nests. So just going to stay to the short stuff and see what we can find. Nothing so far in terms of oak trees, that is. Let's have a good look around. This is one of the areas where I did actually plant some by making holes and planting the acorns rather than just scattering them. So I'm expecting that we should see some little acorn sprouts coming up amongst here, but nothing yet. Maybe it's been too dry in the spring. Oh, hang on, here we are. Look at this down here. That is an oak seedling. Right there. Tiny little oak tree, just growing. That's this year's growth. Pretty confident that is one of my acorns that I planted last year. Of course, that little seedling has got a lot of trials to get through before it has any chance of developing into a mature oak tree. It could get grazed off by an animal. It could get trodden down by a human. It might get uprooted by a deer. Or it might get mown off by if they come back and mow this grass, so it might get cut off then. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong. It could just get damaged by insects or weather or whatever. But it's good to see that we found at least one acorn that had grown. I'll have a wander across this bit and see if we can see another one. I can actually, the other thing I thought we'd have a look at, there's some yellow flowers over there. We're going to have a look at that plant. So I can tell even from this distance we're looking at something in the mustard family. Let's see if I'm right. So, what have we got here? Have a close look at those flowers. Now, one thing I didn't mention in the foraging, how to start foraging video, is about touching plants. And a few people picked up on that, and they're quite right to do so. In the UK here, there aren't very many plants that will harm you just by touching them. There are a few. Giant hogweed is one, stinging nettles obviously, and there are a few others that you probably shouldn't handle, and more that you should probably wash your hands after you handle. Like the poison hemlock, you noticed I was wearing gloves when I handled it. The risk is small from some of those, but yeah, I would always wash my hands after handling a plant I know to be poisonous. Obviously in other parts of the world there are some plants like poison ivy, poison oak and things like that which will harm you just from touching them. So if you are a complete novice amateur naturalist, I suggest not touching anything. Look with just your eyes and maybe look up what sort of plants you've got in your locality that could be dangerous to touch. That's a good place to start anyway. Look at what the poisonous and dangerous plants are that grow in your region and be especially careful. Anyway, this one I know is a species of mustard of some sort. Can't really see the flower. Let's see if we can find a really good example of a four-petaled flower. There we go. Right in there. Focus, come on. There we go. 4 petals in a cross shape. Definitely a species of mustard. Lots and lots and lots of flowers. I bet the bees love that. Mustards are actually quite difficult to tell apart. Let's get the book out and see what we got. Okay, so having consulted the book, there's actually quite a few candidates here for yellow flowered mustard family stuff. But you can notice they're all a little bit different. They've all got different shaped leaves, or the way the flowers are arranged, or the seed pods. The best fit here is number 5, because it's got seed pods that are kind of held upright. It's got these little leaves that are a bit like rocket, I suppose, actually, kind of palmate on the end, but with a little bit of little leaflets sticking out there. And that does indeed match what I'm seeing here in the book. So number 5 is common wintercress, and I'm fairly confident in that identification. Again, I will take some photos and we'll have a closer look at that in the big book when we get home. Something just down here that's definitely worth a look. Got a little pink flower, very similar to that dove's foot cranesbill that we saw in the foraging getting started video, but very different leaves, much more sort of spidery leaves. Very similar flowers, 5 petals with a little tooth in the end, but the leaves are very much more spidery and on longer stalks. So, book out, let's see what we got. That was actually really easy. So there's the dove's foot cranesbill we saw the other day, and that's the one we're looking at now with much more cut leaves, and it's called cut-leaved cranesbill, Geranium dissectum. Grows mainly in bare and waste places, check, and has its leaves cut almost to the base, check. So, again, pretty confident we're looking at cut-leaved cranesbill there. Now it's late morning now, and some of the plants we see flowering here in late morning, in the sunshine, will have lost their flowers by mid-afternoon. And likewise, some things that are not in evidence right now will produce flowers which appear or open later in the day. So it's worth coming here at different times to have a look and see what different things there are to observe. Down here there's a tiny little white flower that you could almost overlook. It's so diminutive. Look at that. And in fact, there's an even smaller specimen down here. Look at that. Tiny, teeny little thing. Okay, let's have a look then. So, what am I looking at? 4 petals in a cross shape. Say it with me. That's something in the mustard family. Really not an awful lot else to look at. There are little spear-shaped leaves that wrap around the stem there. Oh, and it has little tiny seed pods on it, and they are heart-shaped. So in my book, on the pages with all the cabbage family and mustard family, we've got something here that's got heart-shaped seed pods. Slightly different colour, but it's got these spear-shaped leaves. Basil leaves are pinnate, but I didn't really see any basil leaves there. But little white flowers, and they're going to be 4 petals in a cross shape because of the family. I think we're looking at shepherd's purse. This plant here needs almost no introduction. This is white clover, and it's pea family. So what we're looking at here, let's have a look. We've got trefoil leaves with a paler green chevron on them. The flowers are these clusters of white flowers, and if we were to look at those really closely, they're a little bit difficult to recognise as pea flowers, but there you go, there's one there. You can kind of see that's a pea flower. So the pea family, white clover, really easy one to recognise that. Down here we've got, I think this is common vetch. Again, very conspicuous pea flowers. Seeds are like little pea pods. Pinnate leaves with tendrils on the end. This very, very typically pea family look to it. The flowers tend to open in the evening actually. This is an early one here. But this plant really comes into its own in the early evening. I was out here last night and took some photos of this while it was open fully. Really quite a beautiful plant. Funny story about this. When I was about 8 years old, my parents gave me a little patch of garden to grow whatever I wanted to grow in it. And I think they thought I was going to grow pansies or radishes or something like that. I went out and gathered some seeds from vetch pods, and I grew some wildflowers, which of course my parents considered to be weeds, and they were quite horrified that I was bringing weeds into the garden, but there you go. So yeah, I guess I've been like this all my life. Okay, one more plant to identify before we go home. This beautiful little pink flowered thing here. Now, we've already looked at several pink flowered things in the last couple of days. Let's have a look at this one. So, these seed pods here should give you a really good clue as to what this is. They look like the bill of a crane. This is a crane's bill. This is a geranium of some sort, but it's not the geraniums we've been looking at so far. So it's got a very creeping habit. The stems are kind of sprawling across the ground here. Simple 5-petaled flowers. So these have not got notches in the end. These are just 5-petaled, very simple, very beautiful flowers. And then the leaves are feathery little brushes almost. So let's get the book out and see what we're looking at. So here I think is our plants down the bottom here. So we've got these hairy red sort of horizontal stems, pointy seed pods, simple pink flowers, feathery leaves. The number 6, which we've got here as common storksbill. Another strong smelling plant that flowers from April onwards, bare and sparsely grassy places and on dunes. While we're in the right location, flowers may be pink, purple or white, sometimes with a blackish spot at the base of the unequal petals. The fruits have a twisted beak, although this is not a notable characteristic of the stalk. So, have the fruits got a twisted beak? Really hard to say. Oh yeah, you can see. Yeah. Okay, let's have a close look at that. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this on camera. When you look at these seed pods, they've got a kind of slight spiral to them. They're straight, but the little ridges and markings on them have got a slight spiral. Let's have a look at what it said about the unequal petals. So the petals are not all exactly identical, and you can see there's a little dark spot on 2 of them at the base, which, let's see what the book said. Sometimes with a blackish spot at the base of the unequal petals. So yeah, so this is unequal petals. You've got 3 equal petals at the top and 2 that are slightly shorter at the bottom. I didn't notice that when I first looked at that. How about that? So pretty sure we're looking at common storksbill there. And just before we go, down here, another little oak seedling. Now I can be very confident that this is one that I planted. This is one that I scattered, because I'll show you where we are. We're right in the middle of the field. We're a long way away from the hedgerows. I mean, I guess it's possible that a squirrel or a jay carried this all the way out here and buried it, but it's far more likely that that's one I scattered or planted. So my little oak trees are starting out their life, or at least some of them are. This also is a very hopeful little seedling here. Pretty sure that's a horse chestnut, one of my horse chestnuts I planted. The stem's sort of sticky, which is a characteristic of young growth of horse chestnut trees. So that's one of my conkers I planted, so that's good also. Chili plant update. It's the middle of May now and they're all doing quite well. Interestingly, we had a late arrival here, so I'm actually now up to only 2 out of the 40 seeds didn't germinate, because we've got this last one just popped up right here. And these other 2 here might still appear, who knows. What's interesting is that some of the plants are very much taller than others. So we've got some here which are stocky and lighter coloured leaves. We've got some here that are taller with slightly darker leaves. The 8 that I planted here, which were bird-eye chilies, are all quite consistent with each other. So that suggests to me that we've got several different varieties growing here, which is kind of obvious. That was a mixed packet of seeds. So I would say probably these 7 here, maybe that one, are the same variety. This little block of tall ones is probably the same variety. We've got another one over here. We've got several here with darker, almost purplish leaves, which might be a different variety. So I think we've probably got at least 3 varieties growing here, maybe 4 or 5. Time will tell. It's still a little bit too cold outside to plant them out yet, or to harden them off. But that's fine, they're doing well in these little modules. My mead is still, well, we're just about to see, still bubbling away, slower than it was. It slowed right down to maybe 1 bubble every 30 to 40 seconds, so it is probably reaching the end of fermentation now. That's fine, we're just going to be patient with this and let it finish its fermentation let it settle out a bit before we rack it off. We've got plenty of time to decide what we're going to do with this. So it's now the start of June, and my pepper plants are at a point now where I need to harden them off and get them outside. In this part of the world, this is about the earliest I can really plant tender things out. So that's what I'm doing now. Some of these plants are actually quite decent size now, but actually you can see there's one that's wilting because they're just struggling in this module pots now and need to go out into the soil or into larger pots. So those will harden off, which means leave them outside during the day for a few days, bring them in at night, by which time they'll be hardened off, they'll be ready to go in the soil. A couple of plants of basil there, which we're doing the same thing with, hardening them off. We'll talk about basil in just a moment. My loquat seedling plant is doing okay. So it looks like we've lost this stem down to there, but that's fine. It'll bush out from there. Nice new growth coming on the other 3 stems. So it's come through the winter okay. We're going to be doing okay. I really like basil. It's a fantastic herb to go with tomato. I bought this as a growing plant of basil, and actually I think there's quite a few plants in there. And that's a common way to buy it. It's getting a little bit old and leggy. Some of the fresh leaves are still okay, but a lot of the plants are now looking past its best. I could just go out and buy another one of these. It's not very expensive, but actually it's not necessary to do that because we can use this to propagate some new plants. I'm going to show you how to do that today. Now you might have seen this kind of thing on some of those viral life hack type of channels, and you might be a little bit skeptical about this, but we are just taking cuttings here, and that's how they actually grow these plants for retail production. So I'm just looking around to see what I can actually pick here, and there's a good bit there. So I'm going to pick a stem there. I'm just going to cut with a sharp knife. I've just cut below a leaf node. See that there's sections of stem and there are nodes where leaves come out. I've cut just below a node, and then I'm just going to remove these leaves. Obviously I can use them in cooking today. I need to remove really all but a few little leaves at the top. That might look a bit sad, but there it is. So we'll just prepare a few of those. So I've got 4 little cuttings here. This one's a bit weird because it was branched where I'd already trimmed out and it bushed out. So now, actually I'm just going to drop the camera down so you can see what I'm doing. So now I've got a container of water and a piece of foil. I'm just going to wrap that foil around like that. And we've got 4 cuttings, so I will just pierce 4 little holes in there. And then these cuttings can just be rooted in water. So we just push them through all the way down and make sure that the bottom of the stem is in the water. And that's it. We just leave that in a place where it's got plenty of light, ideally out of direct sunlight, because it will tend to suffer a little bit if it's in beating sunshine. So we'll just put that in a light but not direct sunlight sort of location and leave that for about a week to 10 days. And just to show you that that does actually work, here's one I prepared earlier. So this is one I did about 10 days ago, and as you can see we've got lots and lots of roots, and I'm just going to pop these up today. So I've got my 2 cuttings from last week. Just tear that foil open so I don't damage the roots coming out, and then we'll recycle that. Little pot of general purpose compost here. Just make a hole with my finger and get those down in there so the roots are well in contact with the soil. Just got to be a little bit careful we don't damage these roots getting them into the hole, because they are quite delicate. So just need to make sure I push the soil in from the sides like that rather than just jam it down in the pot. So there we go, that can go on my kitchen windowsill, and in a couple of weeks time these basil plants will be big enough for me to start picking leaves and using in the kitchen. And after that, of course, the next succession of plants is waiting here to start rooting. And I can take cuttings from these and start more plants, and I can just do that indefinitely as long as the growing conditions are right. You can carry on taking cuttings from the plant, grow that on, take cuttings from that plant, grow that on, and so on. Kind of infinite basil. So because the nature of these random videos is that I record these pieces over a span of time, I'm able to show you not just one I prepared earlier, but one that you watched me prepare earlier. So these are the cuttings that you saw me pot up earlier in the video, and you can see there are roots coming out the bottom now. And these are the cuttings you saw me take and put in water at the same time, and you can see roots have formed on the bottom there. So I need to pot these up as well. What I'm going to do with these plants here is just nip out that top pair of leaves on both plants, which might seem a little bit brutal, but now that will cause the plants to bush out from all these little side shoots down here, produce more stems, and more stems equals more basil leaves. So I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.